Hello everyone, this is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum here in Morristown, Tennessee. And we want to welcome you to the first episode in a special mini-series for America's 250th birthday celebration, The Foods That Made America. In the course of this mini-series, we are going to be taking a look at some of the staple foods, the staple soldiers' rations that fed both the Continental Army and the militia alike. Napoleon Bonaparte is supposed to have once said that an army marches on its stomach, and no truer words were spoken. So, in today's episode, we're going to be looking at some of the strict standard soldiers' rations that would have been issued throughout the time of the American Revolution. But as the mini-series progresses, we're also going to take a look into some of these interesting dishes that the soldiers would have made with what rations they had due to necessity and due to the fact of the matter that they had to survive to fight one more battle, march one more campaign. Well, folks, if that doesn't already go ahead and catch your attention, then I will just simply go ahead and ask you to please follow along as we explore the truth, the history behind some of the foods that made America. Throughout this series, we're going to be relying heavily upon eyewitness accounts from soldiers who had fought in the American Revolution. Most notably of these accounts is the journal of Private Joseph Plum Martin, also known as Private Yankee Doodle. Now, in the early part of his journal, he recounts that by the year of 1774, he noticed that the stench of war began to linger heavily upon the country. Nonetheless, Joseph Martin was not necessarily interested in answering the call and going off to fight. But, despite trying to stay out of the conflict, he inadvertently found himself being drawn into it, sucked into this maelstrom of madness that would inadvertently gain America its independence. And before he knew what was up, he was suffering through many unimaginable privations while he served as a private in none other than the army of George Washington. In 1775, the best of intentions were made to adequately supply the soldier and militiamen that marched against the Crown forces. However, intention rarely matched up with result. The average rations supplied for the army were 1 pound of beef or 3/4 of a pound of pork, 1 pound loaf of bread, which more often than not they would not get, receiving flour or cornmeal instead. To round out the daily rations, the men were issued a pint of milk and a quart of beer. Other rations could be split peas, rice, beans, vinegar, or non-food essentials such as soap or candles. In many cases, the men did not receive what was promised and had to resort to foraging. In the event they did receive these rations, they were certainly not of the quality that they had hoped for. Joseph Plum Martin writes, "We drew a day's ration of beef and flour, what was called a pound of each. The flour, perhaps, was not far away from its nominal weight, but the beef was, as it always was in such cases, and indeed in all others in the army, not more than 3/4 of a pound, and that, at the best, half bone." Now, as good Providence would have it, we have in fact received today our ration of flour, and we also have our beef, which is certainly not much, but hey, it's better than nothing. It's going to fill up our bellies. And it just so happens that I've liberated a few vegetables from a nearby Tory garden. We've got a couple of spring onions, a potato, not the biggest, but it's enough, and we also have 1 carrot. So I think all this together, with the addition of maybe, if I happen to have in my pack some spices, maybe just a touch of salt, something to send it a little bit over the edge, then we'll be pretty good to go. Now, what's interesting about the beef rations that were typically being delivered to the soldiers at this time was that they were predominantly from some of the tougher cuts, mostly around the shank, the leg. And here's what we do find interesting about this is that although most of us today, we would think, well, that's just pitiful. We want, a ribeye, a filet mignon, a strip steak, skirt steak, you name it. Well, these guys were just happy to get some meat at all, but also you can in fact take the bone, what section of bone you do have, and roast it over the coals to extract the marrow from the bone. It's a little bit of extra fat, a little bit of extra calories, and so we're going to try and throw that in with our meal once we have went ahead, cut up all of our produce and our beef, as well as we can get some from off of this bone here. And then from there, we're going to try and make an 18th century soldier stew. Stay tuned. All right, folks, so as you can see, I've got everything pretty much prepped and ready to go. I've got my ration of flour. I also tried to roast my portion of shank or leg bone to get the marrow, but unfortunately the coals were too hot. It was roasting it way too quickly, so I had to pull it out of the fire. So instead, while we're waiting, we are going to go ahead. We've got our tin cup with some water in it set on some very hot coals. That's already steaming. It should be able to boil here in just a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and add in our ingredients. Now, I want you to take a look at this here. Mind you, this was all that I was able to get from the vegetables I've liberated from the garden, as well as from my ration of beef. I mean, that beef doesn't amount to maybe more than a couple of mouthfuls. And that's pretty much it. Which is historically accurate, according to Joseph Martin's journal entry there, but still, that right there, while I was cutting up these rations, just put into perspective for me how bad these guys really had it. I mean, think about the conditions they endured, the blistering heat, the bone-chilling winters, and in many cases, they were not getting these rations. And if they were subpar, they were less than their nominal weight, and yet they were still forced to endure. They were still expected to march out and fight these battles, march out on campaigns and continue going no matter what. I tell you, I'm doing this here from the comfort of the tavern, and my mind is just honestly kind of blown by how meager this fare really is. Now, I'm sure once it's all put together, it'll turn out to be a pretty passable stew, but definitely nothing like any of the stews that we would readily look forward to having today or enjoy. It really puts things into perspective, guys, and I honestly think that we should appreciate a lot more what these guys did to get our independence back then, but also we should appreciate how good we have it today. So either way, despite that, we're going to go ahead, get our water up to a boil. We're going to put our meat in first, and then afterwards our vegetables. A little bit of flour towards the end to thicken things up, and then we'll go ahead and if we've got any salt in our provisions, we'll use a little bit of that, and hopefully we'll have a flavorful stew along with some bone marrow. So just stay tuned, and we'll see how it all turns out. Okay, so we put everything together. What little beef we had, potatoes, carrots, onions. Of course, the water, we got it to boiling. We put in some flour to thicken it up a little bit, but the reality of it is when you're cooking over a fire, no matter how experienced you are, it can be a trick to try and actually regulate the overall temperature of the coals and the flame itself. Of course, we mostly cook over the coals unless we're doing some kind of flame broiling. But that being said, one thing that you always want to be careful with, and it'll happen to the best of us, is that when you go in to put your flour in for a thickening base, especially in a situation like this, then you want to try and do it when the water is warm-ish, but not hot. Because no matter how much you stir, then you will still get, as you can see, kind of attached to the spoon here, and if I can get one of them, the flour clumps up. It kind of turns into dumplings, which is not the most off-putting thing in the world. I mean, I like dumplings, and I'm sure that these guys would have liked them as well, because what else are dumplings but a filler for your super stew? And so this kind of added a little bit of an extra meaty texture to definitely help out with filling up the belly and fortifying the man. Now, we currently have our leg bone back on the coals. It is roasting, so we can crack it here in just a little bit and and get the marrow out. We're going to let that roast while the stew is cooling down to a certain amount. But while it is cooling down, I happen to have here my pocket spice kit. I'm sure some of you might know where in the world you get these from, and that is on the Townsend's website with John Townsend. Pocket spice kit is wonderful. They come already with some spices, but in the event that you don't like any of the spices in particular, you can empty out the vials and put them in with your own spice. I know for a fact John Townsend, he likes to substitute his cinnamon for nutmeg on many, many occasions. But we've got a little bit of salt, and we've also got just a touch of black pepper. So we're going to go ahead and put these together in here just enough to where we can taste it. So about a little less, well, right at about a dime size for your salt. And of course your salt will like to stick, especially on sweaty hands in the case that it is today. I'm going to stir that up just a little bit. And mind you, if you're doing this in the comfort of your own home, you could always go ahead and season it to taste. I think I'll add just a pinch more there, and there we go. And then we're going to stir that up before we move on to putting in our black pepper. Now, this is something that I have actually tried before, believe it or not. And I've also tried other recipes, a variation of this of sorts. Now there's one that I would highly recommend, and that is using beef jerky. If you're pressed for time and you don't want to smoke your own meat or anything like that, you can in fact use just pre-packaged Jack Link's beef jerky and cut it up, get your water boiling, and then put that in there. While the water boils, it will soften up the jerky a little bit, and then you throw in a little bit of flour. Now of course you'll get some dumplings, but stir it in, and it's actually quite good. And you don't need any salt or pepper, because guess what? All that flavoring is already right there in the jerky. So that's a little cheat code right there. That should be just about enough pepper for this amount here. We're going to go ahead, put everything back in our pocket spice kit. And of course then we're going to stir up our pepper and salt with our stew. And you'll notice as the stew is starting to cool down just a touch, the flour will help to thicken it up a little bit more. So that's something we want to bear in mind. If you are disheartened with the texture of the stew at first when you pull it off of the coals, don't be, because everything will kind of settle together. Now mind you, this is not the most appetizing looking thing, but then again it's not necessarily meant to be. But here's the main thing you have to bear in mind, is that when it comes down to it, it's not supposed to be 5-star cooking or dining. It's literally just supposed to be something to fill your belly and give you the hope that you can make it through to the next day. But before we test that, we're going to join you here in just a few moments. Once the leg bone is roasted, we're going to crack it open, we're going to get that marrow, and we are going to have a feast for an 18th century soldier in George Washington's army. Stay with us. Alright folks, so we have kind of some bad news to relate. There wasn't quite as thick of a center of marrow as I thought there was going to be in the bone. And with that being said, the coals just melted it down. It rendered out for the most part. But when I did set the bone on, because I was going to try and crack it and then extract it, there was still some that actually dripped down onto the board. Still some of the liquefied marrow. So here's the thing is, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And we are certainly going to make lemonade, because we took what liquefied marrow we had on the board here, we poured that into our stew to add a little bit more flavor, a few more calories, a little more nutritional content. Now, with that being said, you saw that we went ahead and put some salt and pepper in here. Mind you, this is not the most delightful looking thing in the world, but let's see how it holds up. Okay, let me see if I can get just a little bit of everything in here. So we've got potatoes, carrots, onions. Well, we might have to go back for seconds. So let's go ahead and try what we can get first. All right. There's some beef. See how it is. Okay. Beef definitely has a bit more of a chewy texture, but then again, it is shank, so it's not meant to be the greatest cut of beef in the world. And then let's see if we can find some potatoes and onions in here, and also, oh yeah, one of those dumplings. I like those. Okay, so, final verdict. This stew is certainly not up to snuff with some of the stews I've made. But then again, it's not meant to be. It's meant to be for survival. It's meant to make do with the best of what you have, when you have it. And that's certainly one of the main things we see throughout Private Joseph Martin's journal when he talks about their rations. So, again, it is not the greatest thing in the world, but trust me. Now, it's kind of warm today, so not exactly the most pleasant thing to eat some hot stew. But back then, or even if I was camping today, I wouldn't care if I had this. This is actually not too terribly bad. Of course, we didn't put too much salt, too much pepper in there. We wanted to put in just enough to where you could get a hint of it, because for one, the salt that they used back then was a little bit more potent, and the pepper was more coarsely ground than what you would certainly buy on the supermarket shelves today. To say nothing of the fact of the matter is that these people had to make things stretch, so they're not heavily seasoning things like we do today. Another thing is that what I notice in this is, yes, you get just a kick of the pepper and a touch of the salt there on the back end of the broth. But again, the soldiers of the time, they were very lucky to have salt. And if you had pepper or any other kind of seasoning or spice, then you were in hog heaven. So, you know, again, this is definitely not one of the greatest things in the world that I've ever tasted. But then again, I already kind of knew that, because I've been doing this for years. I've made recipes similar to this over the campfires, God knows how many times. So hey, you know what? Overall, not too bad. And I'm sure to a hungry soldier like Joseph Martin, this would have been a feast. And, you know, I keep saying it's bad. Maybe it's because it was cooked over the coals. Maybe it's because I'm hungry. But I find myself, I can't stop eating it. Either way, this is a very good insight. This is, I guess, what you would call experimental archaeology at its finest. And, folks, all I can say is, if something like this doesn't make you appreciate what you have today and make you appreciate what these men went through back then all I can say is you definitely need your eyes opened in more ways than one. But overall, not bad, and it certainly would have been highly, highly appreciated for the men fighting back then. It certainly would have been something that would have filled their stomachs and fueled their hope, given the encouragement to live to fight another day, or just live to see another day in general. So with that being said, this concludes our video for this week. And now, of course, we've got some more recipes that we're going to be trying out as the Fridays progress for our Foods That Made America series. We hope you'll tune into each and every one of them. But until that time rolls around, this is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum, signing off for now, saying goodbye, God bless, and have a happy 4th of July.